Princess Silara stood in the grand throne room of the Cerathian Empire, her heart pounding. Tall, broad-shouldered warriors lined the hall, their crimson armor gleaming under the golden light of the great chandeliers. Their piercing eyes were fixed on her, not with respect, but with disdain. Her father, Emperor Vorkalf, sat on his massive obsidian throne, his sharp features carved from years of battle and rule. His deep voice echoed across the hall. "Silara, you are weak." The words struck harder than any blade. Silara was unlike the others of her race. Cerathians were warriors, born for battle, raised to conquer. Strength meant power, and power meant respect. But Silara, she had never won a duel, never led an army. She preferred words over weapons, strategy over brute force. To the Cerathian nobles, she was a disgrace. "Your cousin, General Varkath, is the rightful heir," the emperor continued. "He has crushed enemies, expanded our borders. What have you done?" Silara clenched her fists. She had tried for years to prove herself. She had trained, studied warfare, learned from history. But Cerathians only respected one thing: victory in combat. Still, she would not back down. "I may not be like Varkath," she said, her voice steady, "but I have something better, a way to win this war without endless bloodshed." The court murmured. The Cerathian Empire was at war with the Vrek Dominion, a savage species known for their cruelty. The war had dragged on for years, with no end in sight. The emperor leaned forward. "Explain." Silara took a deep breath. "The humans." The room fell silent. Humans were seen as a lesser species, small, fragile, with no natural weapons. But Silara had studied them closely. What they lacked in strength, they made up for in something far deadlier: their minds. "They fight differently," she continued. "They don't rely on brute force. They use deception, strategy, technology. They don't follow the rules of war." A noble scoffed. "They are weak." Silara smirked. "Then why have they never been conquered?" Silence. Even the mightiest empires had failed to break humanity. Their resilience was unmatched. Their ability to adapt, to turn weaknesses into strengths, was terrifying. "I propose an alliance," Silara said. "And to seal it, I will marry a human." Gasps filled the hall. The idea was unthinkable. A Cerathian princess marrying a human. Disgraceful. But Silara wasn't done. "My husband will not be just any human. He will be Captain Ethan Drake, a warrior, a strategist, a survivor." She looked at her father. "With him at my side, I will win this war, and I will prove that I am fit to rule." The emperor's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled. "Very well, daughter," he said. "But if you fail, you die." Silara lifted her chin. "Then I will not fail." The game had begun. Ethan Drake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as he studied the alien princess standing before him. She was tall, graceful, and had sharp golden eyes that burned with determination. But there was something else: desperation. "Let me get this straight," Ethan said, raising an eyebrow. "You want me to marry you, just like that?" Silara stood firm. "It is a strategic alliance." Ethan let out a short laugh. "That's one hell of a proposal, princess." They were inside a high-security Cerathian warship, orbiting a dying star. Around them, Cerathian warriors glared at him, clearly disgusted that a human was in their presence. Ethan didn't care. He had fought against worse odds before. "You need me," Silara continued. "And I need you." Ethan leaned forward. "Why me?" Silara's gaze didn't waver. "Because humans fight differently." Now that got his attention. Most aliens underestimated humans. They saw them as weak, fragile, unworthy. But those who faced humanity in war knew the truth. Humans didn't fight fair. They fought to win. "I've studied your battles," Silara said. "You don't just rely on strength. You use deception. You adapt. You do whatever it takes to survive." Ethan smirked. We do what we have to. Silara nodded. And that is exactly what the Cerathians need. Ethan exhaled, tapping his fingers on the table. This was insane. Marrying an alien princess, becoming part of an empire that saw his kind as nothing more than pests. But then again, humans had been underestimated for too long. If this marriage gave him power, if it let him shape the future of an empire, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. What's in it for me? Ethan asked. Silara hesitated, then spoke carefully. You will gain power, influence. You will stand at my side, not as a pawn, but as my equal. Ethan studied her. She meant it. He grinned. All right, princess. You've got yourself a deal. The warriors around them bristled, some growling in anger. One of them, a massive brute, slammed his fist on the table. This is an insult. A human cannot be part of the royal bloodline. Ethan didn't flinch. He just tilted his head and smirked. You want to test me on that? The warrior growled, but Silara raised a hand, silencing him. Ethan will prove his worth, she said, just like I will. The Emperor's voice suddenly echoed through the room, his massive form appearing on the holographic screen. Then it is settled. You will face the right of proving. If you survive, the wedding will take place. If you fail, you will die. Ethan chuckled. Of course, wouldn't have it any other way. Silara met his gaze. Then we both have something to prove. For the first time in history, a human and a Cerathian princess stood side by side. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Ethan stood in the center of the massive Cerathian arena, rolling his shoulders as he studied his surroundings. The place was a coliseum of death, its stone walls towering high, decorated with the skulls of fallen warriors. Thousands of Cerathians filled the seats, roaring with excitement. At the far end of the arena, Princess Silara stood with her father, Emperor Vorkalf. She looked calm, but Ethan could see the tension in her eyes. She had everything to lose. The rite of proving begins. The announcer's voice boomed. A massive gate creaked open, and a beast stepped out, a creature that looked like a cross between a lion and a serpent, with black scales and glowing red eyes. It was a Korgeth warbeast, engineered for one purpose: to kill. Ethan let out a low whistle. You guys really don't mess around, huh? The warriors in the audience laughed, expecting him to be torn apart in seconds. The beast lunged. Ethan dove to the side, barely missing the razor-sharp claws. The ground shook as the creature landed. It was fast, too fast. If Ethan tried to fight it head-on, he wouldn't last 5 seconds. But that's the thing about humans. They don't fight fair. Ethan quickly scanned the arena. There were loose stones, cracks in the ground, and shadows where he could hide. He could use this. The beast charged again. This time, Ethan didn't dodge. He ran straight at it. Gasps filled the arena. Had he lost his mind? At the last second, he slid under the beast's belly, grabbing a handful of loose sand and throwing it into its eyes. The war beast roared, blinded for a moment. Ethan used that moment. He jumped onto a broken pillar, then onto the beast's back, wrapping his arms around its thick neck. The creature bucked wildly, trying to throw him off. The crowd roared, not in anger, but in shock. This was not how warriors fought. This was human trickery. Ethan grinned. Yeah, you better get used to it. The war beast rammed itself into a wall, trying to crush him. Ethan leaped off at the last second. The impact stunned the creature. That was his chance. He grabbed a fallen spear, ran forward, and drove it into the beast's skull. Silence. Then the war beast collapsed, dead. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned disbelief. Then cheers erupted, not all, but some. The Cerathians had just witnessed something they had never seen before. A human, a weak species, had just outsmarted one of their deadliest creatures. On the royal balcony, General Varketh scowled. He had expected Ethan to die. This was not part of the plan. Silara, however, smiled. Ethan had just proven what she had always believed. Strength wasn't just about power. Strength was about survival. And humans, they were the best survivors in the galaxy. The Cerathian arena was still filled with murmurs of disbelief. A human had defeated a Korgoth warbeast, not with brute force, but with strategy and deception. Some warriors were impressed. Others, like General Varkath, were furious. Ethan stood in the center, catching his breath. His arms ached, and sweat dripped down his face, but he smirked as he glanced up at the royal balcony. Silara met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw something new in her eyes. Hope. But the trial wasn't over yet. Emperor Vorkalth rose from his throne. His voice boomed across the arena. You have survived the beast, human. But now you must face a true warrior. A second gate opened. This time, it wasn't a beast that stepped out. It was a Cerathian warrior, clad in battle armor, holding two curved blades that gleamed under the arena lights. Ethan's smirk faded. Well, shit. The warrior was twice his size, his muscles carved from years of combat. He was no mindless creature. He was trained, fast, and deadly. The crowd cheered, eager to see blood spill. They believed Ethan had no chance. He had won against a beast, but this was execution. The warrior didn't waste time. He charged. Ethan barely had time to dodge. The blade whistled past his face, close enough that he felt the air shift. He scrambled backward, his mind racing. This was different. He couldn't rely on tricks alone. He had to fight. The warrior lunged again, swinging his second blade. Ethan ducked, rolling to the side. He had no weapons, no armor, just his speed and his wits. And one important rule: never fight the way your enemy expects. The Cerathian warrior expected honor, skillful swordplay, a proper duel. Ethan gave him none of that. He threw sand into the warrior's eyes. The crowd gasped in outrage. Warriors fought with honor, not like this. The warrior staggered, blinded for a moment. That moment was all Ethan needed. He grabbed a loose rock and slammed it against the warrior's head. A sharp cry of pain. Blood trickled down the warrior's temple. He stumbled, disoriented. Ethan didn't stop. He kicked the warrior's knee hard, sending him crashing down. Before the Cerathian could recover, Ethan grabbed his own fallen blade and pressed it against his throat. Silence. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or scream in rage. The warrior panted, his hand gripping the dirt. He had lost. Ethan looked up at the Emperor. Is this enough proof, or do I need to beat your entire army? A long pause. Then laughter. Emperor Vorkalth grinned. You fight like a coward. Ethan smirked. I fight to win. The Emperor nodded. Perhaps that is the better way. Silara clenched her fists. Ethan had done it. He wasn't just her husband now. He was her weapon. The moment Ethan dropped the blade, the arena exploded into chaos. Some warriors roared in anger, calling him dishonorable. Others laughed, amused by his cunning. But the loudest reaction came from Emperor Vorkalth himself. He stood, his eyes locked on Ethan. Then, to everyone's shock, he nodded. The human has proven himself, the Emperor declared. The marriage will proceed. Silara exhaled slowly. It was done. But Ethan, he just grinned and muttered, Guess I'm a prince now. The ceremony. 2 days later, the grand halls of the Cerathian palace were filled with thousands of warriors. Torches burned high, casting golden light across the massive obsidian pillars. The air was heavy with tension. Ethan stood tall, dressed in royal Cerathian robes, a mix of armor and ceremonial silk. He hated how stiff it felt, but at least he looked the part. Silara stood beside him, her usual battle armor replaced by regal attire. The golden markings on her dark skin glowed faintly, signifying her royal status. As the Cerathian high priest raised his hands, the crowd fell silent. In this union, we forge a new path, the priest intoned. Strength and strategy, power and cunning. This is the way of the Cirathian Empire. Ethan smirked. They were already rewriting their traditions. He turned to Xylara. You sure you want to do this? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she said, this is bigger than us. She was right. This wasn't just about marriage. It was about changing an empire, reshaping the future of the galaxy. The priest finished the rites. It is done. By the will of the empire and the blood of warriors, the bond is sealed. A deafening roar filled the hall. Xylara looked at Ethan. Now, we lead. He chuckled. Oh, this is gonna be fun. The threat ahead, but not everyone celebrated. In the shadows of the palace, General Varkath clenched his fists. This alliance was a disgrace. A human, standing beside a Cirathian princess. Unacceptable. He turned to his most trusted warriors. This is not over, he growled. That human is a disease, and I will purge it. The war wasn't over yet. And soon, Ethan and Xylara would face their greatest battle yet. Ethan had barely settled into his new role as Prince Consort of the Cirathian Empire when trouble came knocking. Standing in the royal war chamber, he watched the holographic map of the galaxy rotate before him. Red markers flickered, showing enemy positions along the Empire's borders. The Vrecht Dominion was regrouping for another assault. Xylara stood beside him, her arms crossed. They're pushing deeper into our territory, she said. If we don't act fast, they'll take the Cayenne system. Ethan rubbed his chin. What's the plan? Varkath is leading our fleets into battle. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Varkath. Something about this felt off. The general hated him. He made no effort to hide it. And now he was in charge of the Empire's most important battle. Yeah, that was a problem. A deadly invitation. Later that night, a Cirathian messenger arrived. Prince Ethan, the warrior said stiffly, General Varkath invites you to the war camp. He wishes to discuss strategy. Ethan glanced at Xylara. Her expression darkened. He's planning something, she muttered. Ethan smirked. Of course he is. Xylara hesitated. Be careful. Ethan gave her a cocky salute. Aren't I always? The trap. The war camp was located on Droxar 5, a barren, storm-ridden planet near the front lines. When Ethan arrived, he immediately felt uneasy. Varkath was waiting inside a large command tent, surrounded by his most loyal warriors. Ah, the human prince arrives, Varkath sneered. Ethan crossed his arms. You wanted to talk strategy. Varkath chuckled. No, I wanted to give you a gift. At his signal, 2 guards dragged someone forward, a bruised, bloody human soldier. Ethan's stomach clenched. The soldier was one of his old crew members from Earth, captured during a past battle. Varkath's smile was cruel. This is what your kind really is. Weak, helpless, unfit for our empire. Ethan's fists tightened. Let him go. Varkath tilted his head. Or what? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he moved. Faster than they expected, he grabbed a warrior's dagger and sliced his throat in one fluid motion. Before the others could react, he kicked a second warrior into the command table and dove for a plasma rifle. The room exploded into chaos. Ethan grabbed the captured soldier, hauling him up. Come on, buddy. We're getting out of here. Alarms blared as Ethan shot his way through the camp, dodging blasts of energy fire. He activated his communicator. Xylara, it's a setup. Varkath tried to kill me. Her voice was sharp. I'm coming. Ethan grinned as he stole a Cirathian speeder. Make it quick, princess. I'm about to piss off a whole army. As he raced into the night, he knew one thing. This war was about to get personal. Ethan gripped the controls of the stolen Cirathian speeder, weaving through the rocky terrain of Droxar 5. Blaster fires streaked past him as Varkath's warriors chased him on their own speeders. The captured human soldier groaned beside him, still weak from his wounds. "We're not gonna make it," he muttered. Ethan smirked. "You don't know me very well, do you?" Behind them, 5 Cirathian warriors closed in. One leaped onto Ethan's speeder, raising his blade. Ethan jerked the controls, sending the vehicle into a sharp spin. The warrior lost his balance for half a second, enough time for Ethan to elbow him in the face and kick him off. The warrior tumbled to the ground, vanishing into the dust. 4 left, Ethan muttered. Silara arrives. As Ethan swerved around a sharp cliff, his communicator crackled. "Ethan, look up." He glanced skyward. A Cirathian warship streaked through the clouds, its cannons aimed at the pursuers. "Silara." A second later, the warship fired. Explosions rocked the ground as 3 of the speeders went up in flames. The last warrior tried to escape, but before he could, Silara herself leaped from the ship, landing in front of him with her blade drawn. With a single fluid motion, she slashed across his chest, and he fell. Ethan pulled his speeder to a stop, grinning. "Nice timing, princess." Silara smirked. "You always get yourself into trouble." Ethan shrugged. "Keeps life interesting." Confronting the Emperor. Hours later, Ethan and Silara stood before Emperor Vorkalv, the air in the throne room thick with tension. Varkath knelt before the Emperor, his face twisted in fury. "The human is a threat to our empire. He uses tricks, deception. He is not worthy of our ways." Ethan stepped forward. "And yet, here I am, still alive, still standing." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to Silara. "What do you say, daughter?" Silara's voice was firm. "Varkath betrayed the empire. He dishonored the right of proving." A murmur rippled through the warriors gathered in the chamber. Betrayal was a grave crime among the Cirathians. The Emperor's expression hardened. He looked at Varkath and spoke one final word: "Exile." Varkath's face twisted in horror. "No, I am loyal. I." Guards seized him, dragging him away. His furious screams echoed through the hall. Ethan watched him go, exhaling. One enemy down. But Silara's face remained serious. "He won't forget this," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "I know." They had won this battle. But the real war, it was just beginning. The throne room was still echoing with Varkath's screams when Ethan and Silara left. The Cirathian warriors watched them in silence, some with respect, others with resentment. Ethan could feel it in their eyes. They weren't all convinced. Many still saw him as an outsider, a weak human who didn't belong in their empire. Silara walked beside him, her jaw tight. "This isn't over." Ethan sighed. "Yeah, I figured." They had removed Varkath, but that didn't mean his supporters were gone. The empire was divided, and if they weren't careful, civil war would break out. And if that happened, the Cirathians wouldn't just be fighting each other. The entire galaxy would see them as weak. Their enemies, especially the Vrek Dominion, would strike. A dangerous message. As they reached the war chamber, a Cirathian officer rushed in. His breathing was heavy, his expression grim. "My prince, my princess," he bowed. "We have received a transmission from the Vrek Dominion." Silara and Ethan exchanged glances. "Play it," Silara ordered. The holographic projector flickered, and a Vrek warlord appeared. His crimson eyes burned with amusement. "Cirathians," he purred, "we congratulate you on your recent struggles." Ethan clenched his fists. They knew. The Vrek weren't just watching. They were waiting. The warlord smirked. "Your empire is weak. Your warriors fight among themselves. Your leaders squabble like children. And now you allow a human to stand among you." He sneered. "Pathetic." The transmission changed, showing a fleet of wrecked warships moving toward the Cirathian border. "You have 3 days," the warlord said. "Surrender your outer colonies, or we will take them by force." The message ended. Silence filled the chamber. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Well, that was dramatic. Silara's expression was unreadable. "They think we are weak." Ethan smirked. "Then let's show them how wrong they are." Preparing for war. The next hours were a blur. Alarms rang through the palace as war preparations began. Silara gathered her fleet commanders, organizing defenses along the border. Ethan worked with Sarathian engineers, introducing human strategies to their battle plans. Some warriors resisted his ideas, until he proved that human tactics could outsmart even the strongest enemy. Slowly, warriors began to respect him. Even so, Ethan knew the real battle wasn't just against the Vraked. Some Sarathians still didn't want him here. They didn't trust him. And if he made one wrong move, they wouldn't need the Vraked to destroy him. As Ethan suited up for battle, Silara placed a hand on his shoulder. "This will be your first war as a Sarathian prince," she said softly. Ethan smirked. "Let's make it a good one." The war had begun, and Ethan was ready. The Sarathian fleet hovered over the edge of their empire's borders, a wall of warships prepared for battle. Ethan stood on the bridge of the Royal Dreadnought, watching as enemy ships blinked into real space. The Vraked Dominion had arrived. Their warships were sleek and deadly, covered in jagged black armor that absorbed light. Their weapons glowed a sickly green, charged and ready. Ethan turned to Silara. Well, they didn't waste any time. Silara's eyes were locked on the enemy fleet. "They think we are weak. We will show them they are wrong." The battle begins. The first attack came without warning. A barrage of energy torpedoes shot toward the Sarathian fleet. Explosions rippled across the shields of their forward ships, sending vibrations through the dreadnought. Ethan grabbed onto the console. "They're testing us." Silara nodded. "Then we answer." She turned to her warriors. All ships, return fire. The Sarathian fleet unleashed hell. Massive plasma cannons roared, cutting through the void. Fighters launched from the carriers, engaging in a deadly dance with enemy ships. Ethan's mind raced. The Vraked were strong, but they fought in predictable patterns. Brute force, overwhelming numbers. But Ethan, he didn't fight fair. The human strategy. Ethan leaned over the tactical table. "We need to break their formation." A Sarathian commander scoffed. "Their ships are stronger. We must face them head-on." Ethan shook his head. "No, that's what they expect." He tapped the map. "What if we lure them in?" Silara caught on immediately. "A feint." Ethan grinned. "Exactly. We fake a retreat, pull them into an ambush." The commanders hesitated. Sarathians were proud warriors, not tricksters. But Silara trusted Ethan. She turned to the fleet. "Execute the humans' plan." The trap. The front lines fell back, pretending to be overwhelmed. Seeing this, the Vraked pushed forward, eager for a kill. But the moment they crossed into the asteroid field, the Sarathians sprang the trap. Hidden warships uncloaked, blasting the Vraked from all sides. Chaos erupted. Ethan grinned as explosions lit up space. "Told you it would work." Silara smirked. "You are proving to be useful, husband." The turning point. The battle raged on, but the Sarathians were winning. Then a message came through. A panicked officer appeared on the screen. "Princess, the Vraked have landed troops on Droxar 5. They're attacking the capital." Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about the fleet anymore. The enemy was attacking their home. Silara turned to him. "We have to go." Ethan nodded. "Let's end this." The battle in space was almost over. But the real fight was waiting for them on the ground. The Royal Dreadnought roared through space, racing toward Droxar 5. Below, the capital city burned. Vraked warriors swarmed the streets, cutting down Sarathian defenders. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of war. Ethan gripped his plasma rifle as the dropship descended. He turned to Silara. Last chance to back out. Selara smirked, tightening her grip on her sword. You first. The dropship landed with a heavy thud, and the doors blasted open. They charged. War on the ground. The city was a war zone. Sarathian warriors fought desperately, holding the palace gates. The Vraked, brutal and relentless, pushed forward. Ethan and Selara hit the ground like a storm. Ethan's rifle lit up the battlefield, cutting through enemies. He moved fast, dodging energy blasts, fighting dirty. Selara was a whirlwind of steel. Her sword cut through wrecked armor like it was nothing. Warriors fell before her, but more kept coming. Then, a wrecked warlord stepped forward. 7 feet tall, armored in dark metal, he was their leader. His red eyes locked on Selara. Princess, you die today. Selara twirled her sword. Try me. The warlord lunged. Selara versus the warlord. The two clashed, blades ringing like thunder. The warlord was strong, every strike shaking the ground. But Selara was faster. She dodged, parried, countered. Still, the warlord pressed forward, forcing her back. Ethan saw it happening. He raised his rifle. But a wrecked soldier tackled him. Ethan's gamble. Pinned down, Ethan headbutted the soldier, rolled, and grabbed his fallen blade. He threw it straight into the warlord's leg. The warlord stumbled. Selara didn't miss her chance. With a fierce cry, she drove her sword through his chest. The warlord's eyes widened in shock before he collapsed, lifeless. The battlefield froze. The Vraked saw their leader fall, and their morale broke. Victory and a new beginning. The Sarathians roared. Warriors rallied, pushing the Vraked back. Within minutes, the enemy retreated, fleeing to their ships. The battle was won. Ethan sat on a broken pillar, breathing hard. Selara dropped beside him, wiping blood from her blade. Not bad, Ethan panted. Selara smirked. You fought well, husband. He chuckled. So, do I finally get some respect around here? She looked around. The Sarathian warriors were watching him with new eyes. They had seen him fight, seen him bleed. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was one of them. Selara placed a hand on his shoulder. You have earned it. Ethan grinned. Good, because I think I like it here. As the smoke cleared, the Sarathian flag rose high over the city. This was no longer just Selara's fight. This was their empire now. And together, they would lead it to glory.